We are also honored to be here with you. We are honored, we feel privileged to be here with you to talk about our work in Mexico with the community projects. I centered basically on the work for the benefit of children, of the development of children. When Rainer invited me to participate here, and yesterday and today I have been realizing there are many other projects in which I have participated that I forgot and not included here because I was centering on this. I distributed among some of you who are not English native speakers a copy of what I am presenting to facilitate your understanding. If you don't have one, Salvador, pásalo, por favor. Okay. You want one? Salva. Okay. When the inhabitants of Mexico City were shaken by the 1985 earthquake, people throughout the city from every socioeconomic class responded in an impressive spirit of solidarity. While official leadership was largely absent at the start, people acted neighbor to neighbor and people to people. These spontaneous reactions made us notice the latent psychological resources of the population and their unexpected potential in the face of the crisis. Since then, the Seminario de Sociopsicoanálisis has developed projects for working with people who live in critical conditions, who are not usually benefited from the deep understanding of human motivation psychoanalysis can offer. We strive to bring the findings of our social character studies back to the communities themselves. Our aim is to support or foster possibilities for initiating participative action projects aimed at transforming the quality of life. Ultimately, our purpose is to help people to confront the difficulties and resistances that emerge on the path to change. We have been working on participative community action projects for almost 30 years. Our efforts started by interviewing poor and very poor children from a miners' village to study the development of their social character traits. The initial study was theoretical, but led us to develop a 9-year participative action project with the community. A monthly weekend open school in a miners' village. After we had applied the social character questionnaire in the community, we started a monthly weekend project of an open community school, exploring the possibilities of change through the participative action project. We collaborated with the students, the teachers, the parents of the school, and gradually opened to the whole community. Community leaders, men and women, mining leaders, and members of the miners' union gradually became involved. And we saw the leaders of the miners painting in the workshop of painting. The open school staged theater plays written and performed by the children, handicraft classes, painting classes for children and adults. A mothers group formed to discuss everyday troubles. This was later combined with a group that started separately a handicrafts workshop using simple waste materials to make useful things. The combination of the two workshops was done at the women's request. They felt their husbands would be less likely to object to their Saturday's attendance if they returned home with something visible, material, and useful that they had done during the day. A silversmithing workshop was developed among the men, and an Alcohólicos Anonymous self-help group was started. After we found children had problems in school due to vision and hearing problems, the language and hearing therapist of our group worked with children with hearing impairment, and mothers learned to measure visual acuity. They volunteered to evaluate the children from the surrounding schools. The Miners Union contributed a bus to bring children who needed classes to Mexico City. We found a hospital that diagnosed them for very low cost, and we contacted private schools willing to collect glasses frames discarded by their students, donating them to the children who needed glasses. Our work consisted of visits to the community lasting 8 hours, one Sunday a month. We worked with members of the community who surprised us with the extent of their voluntary participation. Members of our seminar held 2-hour weekly discussions in which we examined each member's monthly activities during our community visits. We discussed the meaning of the children's paintings and in the plays they performed at the end of each of our visits. We also examined our own emotional reactions and their meaning in relation to the community's gender battles, poverty, and hopelessness. We compared the initial questionnaire responses of children to those administered 3 years later. The analysis pointed to an unexpected result. The children were apparently describing less or experiencing less maltreatment by their mothers. In the next session of the Mothers Workshop, we asked them if they thought there had been any changes in their homes. Their straight answer was, "We have lowered the volume of our shouting at children quite a bit, but what has definitely stopped has been the hitting." 2 of the mothers attended a congress on community action projects where they shared their experiences. They said, "Through the doctor's visits, we discovered that our problems were not only ours, that other women were facing the same kinds of problems and that we were not alone." Later, the weekend school gave way to the establishment of a local house of culture, a government institution. An abandoned house was lent for it and was rebuilt. In the end, our participation came to a close when political authorities took over running the building. The project Artists for the Streets in Mexico City. We started this project by administering the social interpretative questionnaire to the children and young adults who attended a center for street children. We also administered it to workshop instructors and board members of the center to orient our participation supporting the non-profit organization called Artists for the Streets, working with children at risk of becoming homeless or street children. Many children and young people survive by cleaning car windshields at traffic lights on the streets of Mexico City. I was told nobody was to imagine that it exists, but it's a real situation in Mexico. The project made a permanent space in an extremely poor suburb for creative artistic activities for the children and youth. It was open and available anytime they wanted to attend. At this center, the young people and children could do their laundry and get some food. They could also get involved in a variety of workshops in plastic arts, music, working with leather, and performing. When the staff members realized some of the attending girls were pregnant and others were adolescent mothers who carried their babies tied to their backs, being 14 years, 13, 15, they started a special room for babies, and some of the mothers participated together in a singing lullabies workshop. After a while, some of the children participated in a circus spectacle that rotated through the streets, like Cirque du Soleil or something like that. A digital animation project using figurines made of plasticine clay was proudly entered into an international contest and was well received. Every 2 weeks, in 2 periods, during 2005 and 2012, SEMSOAC members participated in supervision and psychological counseling of the staff and creating a space for therapeutic listening, which often took the form of crisis intervention. We held weekly meetings with the youth and another meeting for children. Attendance was voluntarily, therefore sporadic. Some came once and never returned. Emotionally loaded materials were faced at every session, with bizarre, aggressive, and frequently disorganized behaviors. The therapist dealt with the emotionally and intense experiences in a once-a-month supervision sessions. Social character and attachment in Mexico City and in an indigenous village. In 1997, we started a research project based in 2 psychoanalytic theories that shared an emphasis on relational processes that fork the psyche: social character theory of Erich Fromm and attachment theory of John Bowlby. The project studied the diets of mothers and their infants from a middle-class urban mestizo population in Mexico City and from a rural peasant Nahuatl population from the mountains of northern Puebla. The latter one was in collaboration with a 40-year-old community development project known as PRADE. We are grateful for the opportunity to participate with the organization Proyecto de Animación y Desarrollo that has conducted a permanent community development project of the Nahua village. We shared the results when we were to film the babies in the home observations. We were taken in a truck that carries animals. For the animals, instead of the animals, we were there with all of our materials, and we went off the truck in the latest place where a car could go in, and then we still walked about 4 kilometers to get to some of the houses where the children were living. In the middle, the walking, all of the peasants were foresting, working in the fields, and they were saying, what are these blondies doing around? And the mothers were very proud that we got to know their homes. We shared the results and implications in Mexico City with a breastfeeding league and a natural delivery training center that collaborated with us. In Puebla, with Prade on their efforts to enhance the quality of life in the community and support the local human rights commission in the area by providing knowledge on the common manifestations of the psychological effects of mental fragmentation resulting from adults and children traumatic experiences. We had a discussion on how to do that because they gathered all the human rights participants from the region to work with us, and we wanted to show Sybil. Do you know that movie, Sybil, of a multiple personality woman that discovers what made this? Some of us were in favor and some against. We ended deciding that we would present it, and we presented that to the village human rights commissions. And when we finished, they said, "Oh, we are also human. We thought this only happened to us, and it also happens in New York." Caregiving, quality, and social character. We examined the prevailing social character orientations of mothers in the urban and rural groups, sorted into 5 socioeconomic brackets: middle upper, middle lower, poor, and very poor. Mothers' responses to the interview were written down and typed up by the interviewers. The typed interviews were then scored on the 6 scales specifically developed by Seminario de Sociopsicoanálisis for detecting mothers' unconscious attitudes toward their lives and their children. We think the result is interesting on the creation of these scales because it facilitates like a clinical way of weighing the attitudes, the unconscious attitudes of the mothers. The first one is sensitivity to emotional needs. The second is lovingness. The third is joy of life. The fourth is attention to everyday survival needs of their children. The fifth is passive hopelessness. And the sixth is active violent hopelessness. We observed whether the individual responses showed a mother to be productive or unproductive and compared the 2 groups. Within each group, we compared the responses of the 5 socioeconomic levels. As we read through the entire interview transcript, we identify and mark the elements that point to particular traits as defined in each scale, sometimes in subtle yet meaningful ways. We then list them together, and we arrive at a point score from 1 through 5 based on the frequency and intensity of the elements exposed in the responses viewed as a whole. By doing this, we mark from where we get the information. Clinicians are very intuitive, and they frequently have very good understanding of what they are seeing, but they do not realize from where they got it. And so we think this is a method that can help to realize. Results. We found the receptive orientation was predominant in both groups. In the urban group, the receptive productive orientation prevailed, and in the rural group, the receptive unproductive orientation was the most common. We found a statistically significant relationship between mothers' attitudes toward life and toward their children and their basic character orientation, whether productive or unproductive, looking at the urban and rural groups combined. We found significant relationships between basic productive and unproductive tendencies in mothers and the blindly coded attachment assessments. Our results confirm that productive mothers have babies with a secure attachment pattern more often than unproductive mothers. Productive mothers tend to be more sensitive, cooperating in the treatment of their babies, which is scored in video, in those that we were walking to film how they bathe the babies, and then that is scored, and more frequently present autonomous, secure transcripts from the adult attachment interview. Our results suggest that the daily material conditions of existence are closely related to the shared character orientations, especially the tendencies toward productive or unproductive orientations in the mothers. The very poor mothers in the rural group were almost exclusively unproductive, even compared to the poor mothers, the vast majority of whom were productive. The contrast was even greater when we compared the very poor to the other socioeconomic levels studied in this group, in the rural group. On the other hand, upper, middle, and upper class mothers in the urban group were more likely to be rated unproductive than middle lower and middle income groups, although the results did not reach a statistical significance. This finding points to our consideration that being able to count on economical resources beyond those required to fulfill basic everyday life needs does not necessarily lead to a better quality of life or caregiving. This is seldom consciously acknowledged. We conducted a follow-up assessment of the children who were assessed on attachment when they were infants and were then, now it's a few years from that, but were now 8 or 9 years old. This follow-up involves a clinically systematized appraisal of the responses to the social interpretative questionnaire adapted for children from 6 to 14 years and their responses to pairs of stories resembling those Piaget designed to explore cognitive moral reasoning, their family drawings, and their comments on family history. We are in the process of developing scales equivalent to the 6 5-point scales used to score the mother's attitudes towards their lives and their children. We code the children's response to the social character interpretative questionnaire on joy of living, sensitivity to own and others' feelings and emotional needs, harmonious relations to parents and other authorities, sibling rivalry, passive hopelessness, and active violent hopelessness. I'll take an instant to tell you, can you go back? Sure. You know how to go back? One more. Okay. This is the drawing of a girl who is 9 years old. We studied her when she was 12 months, and we have the assessment of her mother. She was a disorganized attachment, which has a very difficult prognosis for her future. And when we interviewed her, we saw a high passive hopelessness, high rivalry with her siblings, and she had quite a good cognitive understanding of the moral reasoning questions, but she said that what probably happened is that the mother of some of the guys who misbehaved probably told she would kill her. And some of the comments, she has an iPad that was taken away from her in kindergarten for misbehaving, and she praises someone that has more money because she knows all her cousins would admire her because she would have the best toys and access to technology, juguetes, toys, and all of that. We see here like a fragmentation from the up and down, which is making us think that some of the drawings at their age can also the difference between the mother and the father against the children is like a sketch, and we are still to develop it. That's her, and the most non-conflicted is the dog. The dog is a part of the family that is not conflicted. So, go ahead, say that.
No, that the figure doesn't have hands
They don't.
or feet to relate.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is what we found, and we found she can think clearly according to moral reasoning, but her dreams are of a menace, and I don't have time to present the case in itself, but there is a congruence from what could be predicted when she was a child, her mother's social character, which also was very passive hopelessness, and what is now happening. And she's emotionally not developed. She can cognitively say things, but she's not going. Now, the next one is from a very poor child who is 9 years old. He's the son of a bachelor mother, has no husband, who he has heard how much this woman calls the father, asking that he becomes responsible for him and for his daughter, from his sister, from the boy. And he does not mention any feeling in the whole questionnaire except envy. I wish I was not so envious. What do you mean by that? As soon as I see someone has something I do not have, I want to send it to the waste basket. I cannot stand that they have what I do not have. That made me a lot to think about Fromm's understanding, like the turning point in envy, when you want something that someone else has, and you want to do whatever to achieve it, from destructive that you just want to destroy it. He's very intelligent. He's one of the best performing in school. He clearly knows his mother, grandfather, and grandmother wouldn't help him if he would be in trouble. And he's only he gives very, very good cognitive responses to the moral reasoning stories, but with a hopelessness that we had not seen in any other child. The only thing is that he knows that by learning hard, he will probably succeed and get out of there. So emotionally, he has no really relation of warmth, of love, or consideration. He has a very high rivalry with his sister, who also wants to take away from him everything he has. And so you see them. This is not as predictive of a disorganization, evolution, but not secure. He was, as an infant, a non-secure, resistant boy. His mother was depressed, with dreams of a lot of suffering. It is a very difficult case in that sense of human suffering from poverty. And he lives with grandfather, grandmother, his little sister, himself, who is 9 years old. And this is the drawing of from the village also, a girl that we call Juanita, who was a secure child, and the family members are in touch with each other. She has a very high level of joy of life, and she has a very good responses on moral reasoning stories. And when children misbehave, mother can probably be angry because the child broke 15 cups coming in when she called him for dinner, but is going to scold him, and then the boy says, but it was just at the door, and they both pick up what happened, and the one who broke one cup misbehaved because he was taking a candy that mother did not allow him, and she could scold him, but not terrible reactions or fatal consequences of what he did. So we think this is also a poor child that has probably poverty consequences, not so poor as the other one, but has other resources which are not exactly economical. Conclusion. A group of psychoanalysts acting on their own interest in a social practice led the Seminario de Sociopsicoanálisis members in the 80s to widen our clinical outlook from our private practice. We have been interested in applying socio-psychoanalytic insight to understanding the difficulties of everyday life. This includes raising children in economically difficult conditions. We strove to participate in shared initiatives with these groups to develop practical health-enhancing and developmental strategies for their children. The people have found these efforts stimulating. They show to be able to overcome hopelessness and resistances to change. We consider this a parallel benefit to the one offered to the individual in clinical practice. The SEMSOAC has made progress in developing a methodology for conducting empirical studies of social character of women and social character development of children in Mexico. Our studies have been conducted in contrasting and very different socioeconomic populations. We have developed special scales to detect character traits in mothers, and we are in the process of developing similar scales for their children. Individuals' responses to the social interpretative questionnaire have proven, on the other hand, to be useful for discovering the effects of unconscious motivation in everyday life and behaviors that affect children's development. Systematically assessing social character can become an excellent tool for exploring, understanding, and encouraging beneficial health policies. I think that the members of the Seminario have benefited from these experiences. And I think you can have the feeling of our working in the communities in a ludic way. We do our work and enjoy it. And they participate with us and enjoy their participation. And we think, initially, in the minors, they said, "What, are you communists?" "Oh, no, we are not." "So you are Argentinian? What are you looking for here?" So we are not exactly communist. We are not Argentinian.
What is the meaning of Argentina?
In Mexico, many of the people who opposed dictatorship in Argentina came to live to Mexico. And they went through a lot of terrible things. And so they participate frequently in a left way with people. But that's what I think they meant when they were asking that. And the Artists for the Streets is a project. There are different institutions that take the children on their charge, and children cannot go out from there. And it's a little bit like a jail. This project is very special because children who want can come and participate. They can do the laundry. They used to be able to do that, and to have some food, but especially to participate in artistic activities, which is enjoying. But it's not taking charge of them, not really protecting them, and not letting them go somewhere. So it's a very special thing. So that's what we have been doing.